Yeah.
Welcome, Mr. Burst.
Mr. Burst, how are you, sir?
Hey, Mr. David Burst. I have dropped my copies.
Oh, we're on
Printed
there.
it. Oh, we're live.
Okay, I'd like to call this meeting of the Curriculum Instruction and Assessment Committee to order for Wednesday, August 26, 2026. It's 2:30 at the office of the St. Charles Parish Public Schools. For the record, we have 5 board members in attendance. Mr. Alexander, Mrs. Weber, Mr. Gregson, Mrs. Boudreau, and myself, Alex Suffren. Committee members of this committee are Mr. Alexander and Mr. Gregson. Also in attendance is the superintendent, Dr. Ken Ordling. We have 2 items on the agenda today. Speaking of assessment, the first item we're going to discuss is the 2025-2026 assessment results. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, Angel Babin, and also Director of Instructional Support, Dr. Stephen Zaffro.
Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for the opportunity to share with you our assessment results for the 25-26 school year. We definitely have lots to celebrate and want to be able to highlight those and bring those to your attention today. So including and starting with those highlights, our district was ranked in the top for 2 specific categories that we want to bring to your attention, and there's some other highlights that will be shared throughout the presentation. But we did rank in the top 5 again. This is for the 3rd year in a row that we have ranked, and that's since literacy results have been shared. So for early literacy, we were 4th in the state, and just last week we were recognized by Bessie for those accomplishments. And so we just are so proud of the teachers and students for those efforts, as well as our leaders and what they're accomplishing. Also of note is that we were in the top 10 for our LEAP performance across all content areas. So lots going on that we know that we're moving in the right direction. And so just continuing with the strong academic growth we're seeing. So the percent of students scoring mastery and above, that is noted in every subject area. So from 3rd grade through 12th grade, we saw improvements in those subject areas and across every major student group. So we're really excited to share those results with you. Not only are we moving in the right direction for our overall population, but when we drill down to specific subgroups and special populations, we see that we're trending in the right direction there as well. So more to come as we get into specifics. So I'm going to start with our K-3 early literacy data. So this is our DIBELS results. And so when we look at our early literacy screener on this slide, you'll see that we were at 77% of our students performing at or above benchmark. And so that is consistent with where we were last year. We've got consistent results here, but we're continuing to drill down even on the particular measures. I was just at one of our elementary schools where we were looking at 3rd grade results and what were some of the error patterns that students were making BOY. So really using that in-time data to make some decisions and instructional moves. Looking at the ranking here, you see that, as mentioned, we were 4th in the state for our ranking, but our eyes on that top as well. And so our team is motivated, and we're looking at that, knowing that we are just less than 3% away from that number 1 spot. So we're continuing to work on helping our students to achieve at those high levels and helping each student. We know when they're at benchmark, then they are strong in being able to have the code that they need to progress through our grades and really be able to continue on the road for comprehension. Looking at our trend data by grade level, you will see that kindergarten really stood out as a bright spot for us. So there was 9% change from the previous year. And so we are still looking at 3rd grade had growth while we took a dip in 1st and 2nd. That is the work that our team in curriculum instruction and assessment is doing alongside leaders and really digging into understand particulars and where we want to dig in to address even professional development. When we think of cohort data, cohort is comparing students from the previous year. So in order to have cohort numbers here, they had to have had previous year data as well. And so we will see that here we did take a little dip, but this is where my team is really digging in. And so looking at the supports in particular, you'll see grade 2 stands out. So that is work that our team upstairs and CNI has been really working on to look at where we could do that support. So while we're 4th in the state, while we're maintaining, we know that we're not resting on our laurels. We want to continue to grow and help each student hit those indicators.
Ms. Babbitt?
Yes, ma'am.
Going back to the doubles trend data
Okay.
at grade level, you said these are things that we're looking at, we're diving into. Our professional plans are going to be focused on that. So what have y'all seen so far that y'all are going to focus on for this year?
That's a great question. So we really are digging into helping teachers understand the measures and how they manifest in the curriculum. So where are some places where we can leverage the opportunity for students to have more practice with connected text, to have more practice with some of the readers, to make sure that they are really practicing those skills. So not that it's just done in isolation. So really leveraging those opportunities to connect.
Thank you.
And then when we look at this last slide for our DIBELS data, you will see that this is broken down by our special populations, our student groups. Definitely are just excited to point out economically disadvantaged students, our students with disabilities, English language learners, and Black students all showed growth in these areas with DIBELS. So we know, even with DIBELS, and I know that Dr. Zaffaro has some information to share about ELs in a moment, but just very excited about the progress that we're seeing for all of our students. And so this is just indicative of the work that's being done across all those grade bands.
Ms. Babbitt, before you move on, if we could just pause in between each major section, that will give the opportunity for the board members or anybody else to ask any questions. Specifically in regards to students that fall below benchmark or for DIBELS specifically, last year you all provided direct support in certain areas of our district relative to improving results. Can you kind of mention that part and what some of the transition is in addition to the focus on Tier 1 curriculum? Just how will we, I call it a mass unit type approach, depending on where the data is showing us where we're going to allocate supports?
Absolutely. Each of our K2 team in particular has reached out with each principal and grade level supervisor for those grades, talking through what does intervention support look like, and so determining progress monitoring. So if our students are below benchmark, then they are monitoring that progress typically on a weekly basis. If they're at benchmark, then it's every 2 weeks. And so by looking at that, if we need to pivot and allocate resources differently, as we did with one of our elementary schools in the spring when we looked at that data and just saw that there were a lot of red flags that we knew that we needed to invest additional human resources and supports at that particular site. The same is true when we're looking at our BOY data and will happen at MOI. It was a great example for us to just realize, we can respond differently to data, and in real time, we want to be able to shift those resources. And so that is definitely something that our team is mindful of. They're providing the supports based on the initial data, but at any point, if we need to, bring somebody from another site and shift them temporarily to provide additional in-time support to make sure that we're getting all of our students across the district where they need to, we're prepared to do so. Okay, thank you.
What grade levels do we use DIBELS?
That is K through 3rd.
Okay, that's what I thought. So since is this all K through 3, or do you have any more K through 3?
We are going to switch to LEAP, so this is the only time for
But
DIBELS.
that's what I
Yes,
wanted to.
DIBELS questions.
So I want to
here.
keep it DIBELS related.
Yes.
That's, have y'all found, or have you looked at, tried to align it or see, have y'all seen, if you're seeing positive scores in DIBELS, is it correlating to LEAP at all? I know it's two different systems that are used. I mean, any correlations at all, or?
I'll leave that one for you to start.
I figure I don't know.
Yeah, without having actual numbers off the top of my head, there is a correlation. DIBELS does lay the reading foundations for students to, actually be able to read and digest text when they get to 3rd grade. So, students who are at or above benchmark, we would think of them as scoring mastery or above when we get to LEAP. But we can definitely dig into those numbers and get you that actual correlation of how it looks going.
I don't want to get in the weeds. I mean, I don't want to add extra work to you. I guess my question is, if we're seeing growth, like on some of these that I'm looking at here, is that correlating at all the LEAP, or is there any correlation? I guess is the question.
So your question, I mean, this question we often ask each other. This question was also posed to the state superintendent relative when he did the beginning of year tours. He did one here in St. Charles Parish. And I'm going to really kind of repeat what he said, which is, Dibbles looks at specific the ability to read, right? The foundations of reading, not necessarily comprehending. We expect once they read to be able to start comprehending. When we talk about LEAP assessments, the majority of the test itself is on comprehension of either reading passages and or material, depending on what the subject or content area is. So to say that there would be probably a high probability that they're not as closely correlated because you can't directly correlate your ability to read to your ability to comprehend. That is two different sets of skills that are connected but not directly correlated. So it would be hard. However, what I will say indirectly, without having a statistician do an analysis, is that as we see our Dibble scores increase and our kids are becoming better readers, then we're seeing incremental increases in LEAP assessments 3 through 12.
That's my question.
Yes.
Right there.
So I would say
cohort
pretty
of
confidently,
Dibbles
without
and LEAP
using a statistician to run a report, I would say it's pretty closely aligned, because if kids are reading, then obviously now it's reading to comprehend, right? Reading to understand, and then building the skills necessary for different types of assessments, whether it's LEAP, whether it's ACT, SAT, whatever it may be.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to correlate, and to clarify, Dibbles and LEAP. I guess if we're seeing an increase, like it is on this page here, right?
Yes.
Are we seeing that, you know what I mean? Just the growth part, right? I mean, I'm not trying to get the exact, like, you seeing 5% here, 5%,
But I do think you'll see that when we share those slides, to Dr. Orling's point.
Okay,
We're
that's
giving
what I was
them
going,
that
yeah.
strong foundation that we're able to track with the screeners of Dibbles to let us know that they are on track and ready to be successful for future grade levels.
I would think if we have kids that have shown continuous growth through Dibbles, but yet when they go to take the third grade LEAP and even fourth, if that comprehension is off, then that tells us something else too. Like, what else do we need to do? What else do our professional learning teams? What are we looking at? How many of our kids are struggling like that? Because if you're a good reader, I'm thinking you should be able to comprehend. I know they have outliners, so that will tell us what can we do with that then. Because I know we have groups to handle comprehension. So I would think that's something that, but I would think if Dibble scores are looking good, I don't think it's proven, but you would hope that your LEAP scores would show that
Starting
continuous
to trend
growth.
upward as well.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
and that's what I was hoping for, so, sorry.
No, you're fine. I'm always scared I'm going to forget my question before I get to say it out loud. She kind of said where my brain was going, where I was thinking about this, but is there a way to say if you have fourth grade ELA LEAP, does that ever get connected to if they're struggling, if they're below, do we look at Dibbles okay, see, this is why I called you, because I had a lot of questions about data and what we use data for and all the gamut of understanding what we do with it and what we can do with it. If you're struggling in a fourth grade ELA test, maybe it's because you were struggling in Dibbles and never did well, and you might need some more just learning how to read assistance versus just comprehension.
That's the next step, and what my question was going,
Microphone.
that would be,
Mr.
yeah,
Gregson.
you with you?
Yeah, and then you could look at cohort data to be able to say, this is their Dibbles in second grade, this is their ELA in third grade, this is their ELA in fourth grade?
So we have rich data at our fingertips for our third graders because they do have dibbles and we have LEAP.
And
so we
LEAP.
really are able to look at both while they assess different things. They both give us very good information that we can use for interventions or supports, extensions, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then students who are performing below when they're finished in third grade, if you recall, there's Act 422 and there are certain things that are implicated from that, but we can also support the students in fourth and fifth grade. So while it's not mandated for dibbles, we do still assess certain groups of students in fourth and fifth grade with those measures to make sure that we're tracking foundational skills when they've had some indication that they still need more. Okay.
All right. We will now transition to look at LEAP data for grades 3 through high school. So LEAP assessments are given in the fall and spring for high school students, and then in the spring for our elementary students in all 4 core subject areas: math, ELA, science, and social studies. And just looking how we did overall, we have some good news to report overall, that we grew by 2 percentage points across all the tests given in terms of students scoring mastery or above. And then in each individual content area, we also saw growth, especially strong growth in math and science. And some of these results will be highlighted in an upcoming Herald Guide article that you should see out soon. So that's our big picture results. If we're thinking about our district rankings, so we are a top 10 district. We're number 7 across all subjects, and particularly strong results, as we'll see here in a second, in math. We're number 3 in math across the state, and top 10 in all individual subject areas. The next slide shows student subgroups. So when any of us look at a table like this is exactly how we'd want it to look. We're really seeing growth across all major subject or subgroups of students: economically disadvantaged, students with disabilities, all racial subgroups. Particularly strong last year were our English learners. So we saw 6 percentage points of growth with them. And we are actually number 2 across the entire state for growth for our English learners. So yeah, we had really impressive results with that group of students.
If I could just pause for just a second and give a reach out of thanks to the board for supporting our initiatives relative to our EL population. You all saw the need, we saw the growth, you all made the investment, and the investment has paid off. So thank you for that investment, and thank you for our educators for making that difference with our kids. Still ways to go. So what's next is still always what's next. CC Cody, I know I use that often, but it truly is. So while we're proud, we certainly know we have a ways to go as well.
And building on that, just even this week, partnering with our special education team and with our English language learners, combining forces with CNI and doing professional development this Friday together. Even our EL students, looking at their data with the English language learner teachers, they meet regularly with Ms. Smith, and they are looking at that data. And so just as we see in PLTs when y'all are able to attend, you see that they're looking at the data and monitoring the performance. This is the same thing. Our PLT of English language learner teachers are doing the same work. So it's exciting to see and the dividends that we're seeing for our kids. Okay.
All right, now we're going to focus specifically on grades 3 through 8 and how our students did there. So this first chart shows really a long-term trend going back 5 years. And across all grades and subjects, we had positive growth, growing from 42% 5 years ago to 44% now. Within that, different subject areas have a different, you can see the pattern for each. ELA has been more or less flat, so we have are continually trying to rethink that. Math is definitely looks like it has the strongest positive trend. So like we just, we're now number 3 in the state, and we've just seen steady growth year after year with math. Science, more flat over time. Social studies, positive trend over time. So we have shifted to new standards in social studies, and we've seen some positive results there.
Even though we've been flat in ELA, when you look at it side by side, ELA and math are approaching at 50 or approaching 50, whereas science and social studies are approaching 40. I mean, is that, I mean, we spend every day on ELA and math, right? And every other day on science and
So in
social studies?
third grade on up, we do focus on both science and social studies. However, there's not exposure until just last January in the lower grades for the social studies content. So their first time seeing science for sure is in third grade. And so that is something that we're looking at. Where can we leverage those pieces in the earlier grades? Can we bring in text even in the ELA content area that is going to expose them to some of those content-rich examples that they can have some more experience with that?
But didn't the curriculum, one or both of these, completely change in the last 2-3 years? Was it social studies or?
Social
Maybe
studies
I'm
is the
wrong.
framework that we have. So
Or maybe it
social
was-
studies in the upper grades for sure. in the
Something
high school.
changed? Okay,
Yes.
yeah.
But we've used, for science, we've used PhD science in the lower grades. In middle school, the ELA curriculum changed last year.
But to your point, Mr. Suffren, it is, at the lower grades have less direct instruction relative to science and social studies than do English or literacy and math. So certainly, we feel as well, once our kids are able to read better, right, we're able to then supplement time that we were devoting specifically to literacy instruction that could be used potentially for science and or social studies. So we do expect those things to improve. You saw improvement, especially at the high school relative to the new standards and the transition between U.S. history to civics. So we would expect something similar occurring in middle and high.
All right, so our district rankings, again, we're a top 10 district in grades 3 through 8 on our LEAP assessments, math being definitely our strongest area. And now looking specifically at each content area and content area by grade level. So the first slide you see here is ELA by grade level, and we saw some positive trends across lower elementary and also 7th grade. 6th grade is typically a transitional year. It's always something we're looking at to try to improve upon. But overall, flat in ELA. Math, we had, across all subject or all grade levels, 2 percentage point gain, but, you saw many grade levels, most grade levels, with some really positive improvement. 7th grade, plus 8 percentage points. Shifting to science. So in science and social studies, 3rd grade, you're going to see particularly strong growth over previous years. We partially attribute that to some shifting of instructional minutes. We've added instructional minutes over time in 3rd grade for both science and social studies. So, there's just more time in the day to focus on those subjects. So we're seeing some strong results there. Science was really, really good for grades 3 through 8. And then shifting to social studies, we have positive, across all grade levels. Again, our strongest growth in 3rd grade, where we've added some instructional time. Also some strong results in 5th grade as well. All right.
What about, if we can go back to maybe ELA, what about the 8th grade through those subjects? We were -5 in ELA, -5 in math, -2 in science, and -2 in social studies. Is that just I know 8th grade, it seems like we have this experience. It's not unusual to have this experience with 8th grade, is that?
This is something that our team is getting right. I know the middle school curriculum team has looked at it. We are getting ready to really dive in with our district ILT in looking at all of that data and slicing it in so many different ways, because obviously we dipped in all of those subjects across 8th grade, and we'll even see some of those connected to cohort. So that is when we talk about shifting resources. that becomes a priority of analyzing that data and figuring out, are there certain hotspots that we need to be more attentive to, whether it's certain schools or certain classrooms for support. Even we did some activities with our principals last week of looking at their school level data for the 3 buckets of accountability last week. And so one of the things that came to light, even at one school when they were looking at their data where it had dipped, they could attribute that to, several maternities in one grade level and one subject that they knew that this was an area that they could attribute that to, but then also knowing that they have new teachers in certain grade levels that they are then making sure their staff development coordinators are really supporting them. So looking at where are the hot spots to make sure that we're putting those resources in the right place.
And yet I think the cohort, this group is ahead of the prior year in the cohort, right? I mean, even though they,
More questions that we have to dig into on some of those data points, for sure.
Dr. Artland and Ms. Babin, when we have our board retreat in October, is it feasible to ask that when we meet then, that have y'all been given enough time to dive into all of this, to say to the board when we meet, hey, these are the things that we saw in 8th grade, or these are the things that we saw in science. These are the things, because I feel like you're right, we just got the scores, you haven't had a chance to slice and dice. I am curious, and maybe just me, call me in, I'm curious just to see like what is it? Like, what is the gap? Because as y'all talking, I'm thinking in our lower grades, would it be possible that through our enrichment, could we expose them to a science, social studies enrichment teacher? I know a lot of times social studies can be brought in through the ELA, but maybe through enrichment, we can have a science person. I know a lot of schools do robotics after school, but you're still not exposing them to the whole concept of science. So I don't know, maybe we can talk about some things, or maybe just with me in October.
I would be happy to share that with you. That is
Okay.
the work of our
Okay.
district instructional leadership team. And so I am more than happy to come back and report to the board overviews by grade level and by the subject areas. I think that is the work that we can't wait to get into as well, and to be able to share
I
with
don't
you
know
all.
if anyone else wants that information, but,
No, I agree. I agree with you. I just was going to piggyback. You were finished? Sorry. To what Mr. Suffren said, but what's ironic is 7th grade was +8, +8, +6, +3.
They're too cool in 8th grade.
It's,
Too cool for that.
but then you start looking diagonally here in the cohort, and I'm going like, this doesn't make sense, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying it doesn't make sense, but like, it certainly, I can see where y'all look at it and go, ooh, red flag, gotta dive in and see, like, is it,
so there's no explanation for it right now?
Not yet, but I want to be able to come back to you all. That is the work, even just thinking differently and slowing down. That's really been something that we are trying to be more intentional with. And those of you who have been associated with school improvement plans before, typically you get this data, you look at it kind of rather quickly and put together those school improvement plans before the school year starts. We really have done a lot of discussion and deliberation about what's the rush. And so can we slow that down? And our directors of elementary and secondary schools have extended that deadline for those plans to be submitted at the end of October, so that schools can do this work and really invest in digging down at looking at the data through multiple angles to make sure that they're looking at trend, cohort, subject, grade level, teacher, subgroups, all of the different ways to make sure that we are really having a clear focus of where we need to put our efforts and energy. So I'm happy to come back and share that information with you all. We're excited to do this work.
All right, just to look at the cohort data here. So, I mean, these are students who have tested in our district in 2 years. And what this data, just looking at this chart and all the green, the students we have within our district and stay in our district, we see growth with. The exception in this chart is, again, 6th grade, which, I said earlier was a transitional year, and so that's always one we're looking, looking more closely at. You'll see different, kind of the same chart across all the core subject areas. ELA had kind of the least, the the weakest growth in terms of cohort growth across all grade and subject areas. Math, stronger at plus 4%. And then science and social studies were both the strongest. So plus 6% in science, and with fourth grade and, seventh grade being particularly strong in there. And then plus 7% in social studies. So, and fourth grade had plus 21% growth for our cohort data in social studies. Yeah. Yeah, so.
We're just saying the eighth grade looks a lot better now you look at
When you look at
cohorts.
cohort.
You sit there and go,
Right.
I mean, and that's why, to me, I'd rather see cohort. I understand that we're scored otherwise, and I understand, look, you have to look at it both ways, but like, you gotta look at to me, that's the way my brain works, but.
And I'll say that with their team looks at both, the schools and the school leadership teams also look at both, because there's more than one story to tell when you look at certain numbers. I will also mention from an accountability standpoint, it's important, especially with the lowest 25%, that we're growing every child, right? Which is weighted more now in the accountability system. So really the work that Angele and her team, David and Becky and their teams with the principals, really narrowing the focus strategically all the way down to that lowest 25, 30%, how that impacts student achievement and school performance has been a focus of theirs through their ILTs and through their PLCs. So a lot more work, but certainly these are valid questions that you all are providing, and certainly ones that we use as well.
Certainly. So when we come back to you all in November with the school performance score and district performance score results, if not sooner, depending on when we get those from the state, those are components that we do look at under the new accountability, as Dr. Ortling shared. So Achieve is looking at what that trend data, the percent of mastery that's on those charts, but the grow column is where we're really looking to see our students growing. We want every student growing and meeting their target levels. So we'll be able to provide some pretty detailed information to you in a few months. Okay.
All right, and last but not least are our high school LEAP results. So the first thing we'll look at is just, again, the long-term trends by subject area. So over the last 5 years, we've seen, positive growth across all subject areas. English 1, maybe slightly downward, flat to slightly downward. English 2, especially with this last year, we see a strong, positive trend. Algebra 1 is particularly strong. So we were 43% mastery or above 5 years ago, and now we're 67%. So that's really a standout subject area. And we're actually number 1 in the state. So that's a huge celebration in terms of Algebra 1. Geometry, strong, positive growth over 5 years. Biology, more or less flat. U.S. history has been trending downward. One thing to bear in mind, this current year is going to be the last year we're going to administer U.S. history. So that will be coming off this chart. And
The test.
The test.
The test, not the
yes.
subject.
Yes.
There has been a lot of doctoring U.S. history and world history, and I think we're seeing the effects of that. That's my opinion. I don't have any evidence.
Do you have any
to support
opinion
my case,
why is it-
but I attribute it to doctoring.
Any opinion on why U.S. history, we've seen those results?
No, nothing that stands out for us at this point, knowing that civics is where it's shifting to, and, but obviously we still have the standards of U.S. history for those courses, but nothing that I can speak to definitively, if you want
A
to.
few things, if I could just mention relative to the high school, because we did change the grade levels at which those two courses were taught at one time, as well as what we have found with specifically U.S. history, the available high-quality curriculum materials are non-existent. We basically create our own guiding documents. I mean, the state provides some relative guidance relative to some of the testing items and the makeup of the test, but as far as high-quality instructional curriculum that the state is tiered one. We just find there's not as much support, better for civics. So I know the focus with our instructional coaches at our high school is really from a PLT standpoint, ensuring the processes in place internally to provide the support necessary for our kids to grow. So we are seeing better results in civics and U.S. history, but U.S. history, they could never provide instructional materials to support what was expected of them on the leap. So that's not an excuse. I'm just saying that that's what we have seen over a period of time. So we're thankful to be going to civics and thankful to be going to the reduced amount of testing at our high school, so it's more applicable.
I'm glad to see we're I knew we were teaching civics, but I'm glad to see we're teaching. I'm glad to see that we've grown a little bit. I'll leave it right there.
All right. All right, so here are our rankings for each high school LEAP course. You'll see that, we're almost, all of these are in the top 10 for the state, the exception being civics, where we're number 11, so right there. The standout, again, is Algebra 1, where we're number 1 in the state. Also, geometry and biology, we're number 3 in the state. So just seeing some strong things in those subject areas.
U.S. history is number 8.
U.S. history is number 8, yeah.
More scores, so that goes to show.
My point, right? No, I'm just,
Exactly.
yeah. Yeah. We're not alone.
Could, once again, just thank the board, again, for your investment that we've made and the shifts that we've made relative to supports at our high schools, through the curriculum instruction and assessment department, removing barriers to our instructional leaders being able to lead. Our teachers in instructional effectiveness is very important. And oftentimes you wonder, okay, well, how is this impacting? We added this, we added that. What are the results? Look at the investment that you all have made in EL. You made it to high schools, secondary. The results are paying off. So I just wanted to note that as well.
All right, and this is just a year-to-year look at each subject area, and the growth across all subject areas is plus 3%. We see speaking of some of those investments that we were talking, Dr. Wortling was just talking about, those top 4 subjects, English 1, English 2, Algebra 1, and Geometry, those now have intensive sections where we have co-teachers for students who have historically struggled with either math or ELA. So we see, you just see some strong results in those areas that I think probably has something to do with those investments. So growth across everything except U.S. history. All right, and then the last thing is our cohort data.
Plus 25.
Yeah.
Explain how they get cohort data.
So cohort data in high school, it's from the last subject that they took in that area. So English, not necessarily grade level, yeah. Yeah, so English 2, it's measured against English 1. Algebra 1 is measured against 8th grade. And a lot of times it's not quite as comparable because the content area can be like significantly different depending on the course. So
Geometry's previous course is Algebra 1, which is very different standards.
Yep.
I don't think geometry is math. I'm sorry, my mic was off. I don't think geometry is math. I think it's a foreign topic, but anyway.
It's got letters.
Yes.
Those first 4 categories, though, as we've mentioned with accountability, this is information that is used for that grow component because it is looking at how did the students do in that previous course. So just to kind of draw a connection to where that falls and making sure that they're reaching that expected growth that we talked about with half achievement levels. This is where that would show up in accountability. Okay.
And I have to commend y'all for celebrating the Algebra 1 because so many people said that was such a great thing to do that because that's tough.
That's tough stuff.
And so kudos for y'all recognizing to celebrate those wins in our academics as well as we do it in other areas. So thank y'all for doing that.
Yes, that was our team coming up with just ways to celebrate the hard work that they're doing. And so you want to put the spotlight on them, and they're well-deserved. The kids accomplished that, but the teachers are working hard with those professional learning teams as well.
And algebra ties directly to the workforce, as I've learned over the last few years, is that apparently to be well, you need to be really good at algebra. Learned that few years ago. So there's a correlation. So if we grew that 25%, then that's pretty strong. So, but
So we've got a great marketing strategy with number one in the state for algebra and tying it to workforce.
There's
I
a
like the
pretest.
connection.
I mean,
Yes.
ABC Bayou actually had shown me that, and I said, and I asked the question, and he explained it, and I said, so anyway, that's true story.
Okay.
Good nugget for the day.
Questions for us? We're prepared to
questions
share
or
with you all with DPS and SPS when those results are shared, and obviously the breakdown that's requested, we'll get that information to you once we go through that process with our district level instructional leadership team. Is there any other question we can answer?
I think our algebra teachers should be brought in here for board and superintendent's recognition for attaining number one in the state.
We will definitely get with public information on that one.
I like that idea.
Any other questions or comments?
Nope.
Well, certainly good news in the area of our core business, teaching and learning, and it's encouraging to see the direction, the progress that we're making. So appreciate both of you and your
Thank
team.
you all for the support
So,
and the continued support. You see the evidence from those investments, so we thank you in return. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Zinn.
thank you, Dr. Stephen Zephyr.
Dr. Z.
And Mrs. Babin will stay for the second item, which is pre-K expansion and Head Start updates. And we'll have Executive Director of Elementary Schools, Rebecca Mathern, and Administrator of Head Start, Antoinette Rodriguez, joining Mrs. Babin at the table to present this item. Again, it's pre-K expansion and Head Start updates. There's an attachment for this item, and we also have handouts. So to start us off, did you want to
Absolutely.
begin?
I'll be happy and honored to begin. So thank you, first of all. If you recall, I do have a hand up if you need one.
Anybody need a handout?
Last August, you all approved as a board for the universal pre-K4 expansion, and this also included additional seats for our 3-year-olds. We are very excited to share with you those results and the numbers that we have, that we are able to provide access and opportunity to our 4-year-olds to attend their neighborhood schools this year. And I don't want to take anybody else's thunder on some of their slides, but those numbers are pretty impressive. So we're excited to share that with you. We do know that with that, there are going to be some challenges that come along the way as well. And so we want to be able to share that information with you and some things that we're working through by having additional little ones on each of our 6 elementary campuses, as well as knowing that there are some Head Start guidelines that we have to abide by. And so we're working through those that are sometimes some unique challenges. And so just to kind of keep you all informed along the way is important. Along with that, we do have some monitoring results from the early learning centers, and we want to be able to share that with you as the board and just kind of give you some oversight of the operations that are happening with that. So if you look at the first slide up there, this is just to give a picture of how Head Start, yes, I think I do, how the Head Start leadership structure is set up. And so when you look at the governing body, that is you all as a board of directors. We know that across the state, Head Start operates in many different entities. And so sometimes it's run by parish government, sometimes it's run by private business. And so we are fortunate that we are able to include Head Start as part of our education system as a school system. And so that definitely has some different challenges. And so when we're working through with our partners and our guidance from different people with Head Start, we want to make sure that they understand how we operate. And so there are certain things that will be brought to the school board, but we operate differently than other entities. And so we want to make sure that it's always rising to the level of what we would expect a board to spend their time on and honoring your time with that. Policy Council is an expectation of Head Start operations. And so basically, I can kind of equate it to a PTA in a school system. And so that's where your parent representation occurs. That's where we're going to make some general decisions about just how things should look for our students and providing opportunities there. So you can see how these, in the Venn diagram, there is some shared responsibility. So a lot of things that will come out as just general operations can be dealt with at the policy council level. That is a term, I know we use policy and procedure to mean something special in our school system. That is a technical term on the Head Start side of things, but we know their guidance when they say policy and procedure, I'm going to equate that more to like a faculty handbook, if you will. So just to kind of give you some connections there. Management staff is the program administration. So that is where our administrator of the Early Learning Center, our assistant, the center directors, that is where those support staff are carrying out the day-to-day operations of the business. Okay.
Okay, so as Ms. Babin mentioned, we did receive a report with some areas of non-compliance, and we want to share that with you guys today. And we'll be able to explain them as we go. I will share each of the areas, and Ms. Rodriguez will talk about corrective actions and next steps that we have at this time. This is in early stages of development, but we are on our way. We've already met with system specialists, and we're on our way to developing ways to correct these
If I can
areas.
just pause and a point of clarification. So this is from visits to the 2 early learning centers in the spring semester. And so we then are going to carry these actions out. It's also something we need to keep in mind because now we've expanded Head Start to not just those 2, we have 6 additional sites. So making sure that everyone is kept informed of what the non-compliance issues are so we don't repeat those, and also what the actions are that we're using to address them.
And how often do they schedule those visits?
We do have where they can come yearly. We will move into the next phase this school year. But specifically when they come on site, sometimes those are every 2 to 3 years. So it had been a couple of years since they had been on site since this past one, and it took place in March 2026.
And the LDOE this year approved policy where they'll come unannounced to pre-K classrooms this year for observation. So that'll take place in addition to the Head Start requirements. Just keeping in mind, when we talk about Head Start students, we're talking about the funding mechanism in part, even though we supplement, you all supplement the majority of it, because we utilize federal funds, we are required to go by their regulations, everything to a T. So and I know Ms. Ellis has been on that board for a while. So it's very T, but at the same time, we have to comply if we expect to receive the money. So this is a byproduct of last year's observations by the group, and then what we're doing is next steps.
I wasn't going to say anything till later, but you just hit on something. It's my understanding, and I'm approximate, don't hold me to a percentage here, but from a Head Start only, it's approximately 50-50 split from what they put into us. But when you look at the pre-K program, we, as a board, put in the majority. I don't remember the number, but it's way more than that because of what we contributed from this universal pre-K. So just, that was one of the questions that was answered for me, a few weeks ago.
Absolutely correct. We, roughly it is 50% when we're thinking of just that Head Start program. But when we start looking at what you all approved as a board and that contribution that you're making, that Head Start contribution looks way smaller than in totality when we start looking at all of that.
If I'm not mistaken, the requirement used to be that we would put 20%, but we always went above the 20. But I believe, unless it's changed, it used to be 20% match that we had to contribute.
I can definitely look into that. I'm not, we are becoming
be
well-versed.
mistaken.
All 3 of us are becoming well-versed in Head Start standards and understanding. Just to give you another point of reference, our early learning centers operate under licensing guidelines as well. So when we think of Bulletin 137 and what they're expected to do with licensing was coupled with Head Start. And so for the longest time, you could almost view those as intertwined or synonymous. However, now that we have the Head Start expectations on school campuses, we need to make sure that we really are able to split the hairs on the understanding of those differences so we can make sure that we're not meeting expectations or putting undue burden on things that are not relevant as well. So that has been the three of us, the homework that we have been really investing in to make sure that we can really support our programs most efficiently. But I do want to look into that, Mr. Ellis, on the percentage as well.
Okay, so the first area that we'll look at was policy council composition. As you remember on the last slide, policy council is one part of the leadership structure, and the Head Start standards require that the members of the parents of the currently enrolled students are the majority of that council. At the time of this citing in March, ours was 50-50, 50% currently enrolled parents and 50% not others. Could have been school staff, community, but we were cited because it has to be majority. The second area of noncompliance was that the governing body and policy council information was not received, such as the policy council didn't receive reports for cash flow statements, income statements, credit card statements, and support the grant recipient in conducting their responsibilities. As Ms. Babin alluded to earlier, because we are a school system, some of those things run a little differently for us, and those things are governed. They just weren't governed at the level of the policy council. So that is something Ms. Rodriguez will share in her corrective actions. And that was based on the November 25th packet. The third area is oral health compliance. According to the Head Start standards, all children are to brush their teeth with fluoride toothpaste once daily, and that was not happening. Ms. Rodriguez did share that there was a waiver post-COVID for this, and it had not been reinstated, so that is something that we are putting plans in effect as well. Already have put.
The waiver or the assistance?
The use and
Both,
enacting
okay.
the standard. No more waiver on that.
Okay.
Brushing teeth daily in the classrooms.
Yes. All right.
Do that across, never mind. Be quiet. Just kidding.
Okay, number 4 was participant eligibility, and it's very tightly related to number 5, enrollment of ineligible participants. In the number 4, only enroll eligible participants based on established criteria. They did do a sampling of folders at that time, 67 of them, and it showed that of the 67 they pulled, 21% of our folders were students that were over income. And the way it's tightly related to number 5 is that they really look at all of our seats in number 5, at the time, 244 seats, and we were at a 19% over income student enrollment at the time. So we have verified that we are not in that situation now, and we are going to talk about some practices to avoid that and some procedures to avoid that moving forward.
I have a question now.
Yes, ma'am.
So let's say we didn't fill all the. You mean I don't hear me without the mic? Come on. So if we don't fill the seats and we're able to take kids in that are over, so we can't take kids in because they don't meet the criteria?
This is as a percentage.
Just a percent cap, right?
Well, I agree. Like, if we can't find children that meet that criteria, but we do have other children that we can take those seats, I mean.
Broke down the percentages for us. So we can take 35% of our 249 licenses can fall between the 100 to 130% over income. And then we can take 10% of our 249 licenses who fall between 131% above income. And then when we talked to them more about that, that was a question we asked, Ms. Becky, was, well, as we live in a very lucrative district, so, a lot of our families do fall in this over income category. And they told us that in order for us to even really go to that max 10% or that 35%, we had to show all the efforts we went through to document that we were recruiting families in that
all the
under income
efforts.
category. And there's about maybe 6 bullets underneath that section in the performance standards that told us some very specific things we would have to document.
Okay.
But we do now have those documentation efforts. And just to kind of echo what Ms. Mathern said, we are keeping those numbers when Ms. Rebecca Perilou sends the updates, which do go to Dr. Ortling as well. She's now including those percentages, the percent that's in that over and then our over.
Okay, so that goes all the way to May?
Yes,
Like,
ma'am.
we have to do our recruiting efforts all the way to May?
Yes,
Is there
ma'am.
like, okay, the end of April, and then we can take whatever? I mean, is it all the way to May?
It is, yes, it's for that year.
Ms. Weber, you have to remember that Head Start originally was for the impoverished
Right.
students.
I am very much aware of that.
And now you have a lot of affluent families in St. Charles Parish, and they will do anything to get their kids into our Head Start program.
I am aware of that too.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
The over, is there a limit on that?
10%.
10%.
We can only take in 10% of the over, so that it's a total of 24 students is what we can take who would
Okay.
fall into that specific category. And we are,
That's 131% above income, right? Is that what you
Yes.
said?
yes,
Okay, and the
those-
35 was what? Give me that number again.
100 to 130 is our, where we can take 35%.
And that's above the poverty line. Yes.
You were saying with additional efforts, you could go over the 10%, right?
Well, they've told us they don't really want us to do that. Even within the 10% and the 35%, we have to show our additional efforts.
So some of
Yes.
this comes back to interpretation, and so while there were conversations and even emails prior to, with the previous director of early childhood that said that we could extend and go over, that was not sufficient in the eyes of the person who was monitoring at that time. So there's a lot of gray area. So we are trying to make sure we're always bringing it back to standards and having them point us into where exactly it's stated. But just to even, build upon what Mr. Alexander was saying, that is correct, that, this is the intention, is to make sure that we're providing those. As a board, you all have done that. That is why you did the universal pre-K as well. We know that with Head Start, that we want to make sure that we are targeting our impoverished community as well, and that those are those efforts. So we've got lots of things in place, whether it's reaching out with our faith-based community and giving them those applications. We do that in the springtime, making sure that we're reaching out, through whether it's different things with the parish government and sports and recreation, making sure we're just trying to target where they are, whether it's through our network, and making sure that we're really reaching out to other families as well. So we'll continue to do so to meet this compliance area.
The good news is this is the first year that we we filled all 249 spots this early in the school year, and we are in compliance with these percentages right now, so. Yes.
I think it's also worth noting that I remember the last data we had on just one of our, I think it was Kelowna, is the number of kids and 3-year-olds, and this is last year's data, it might have been 3 or 4, but the number of 4-year-olds was 15. But you're going to go back and attribute that to transportation is one of the probably biggest reasons why. So, I mean, but to correlate this whole thing to St. Charles Parish, you're living in the river, the gray, so.
So we can't wait to share with you all about the investment you made as a board, because you're going to see that when we get to our numbers shortly. I'm very excited with those results.
Okay, number 6 was eligibility documentation. So all records have to show the required elements, and one of the required elements is to have an interview with every family. This interview can be conducted in person or by phone. And so I brought this as a sample, and I'll share, I'll pass it up if you want to see an example of what we're sharing here.
Thank you.
There's just one little spot I'll draw your attention to at the top that says interview date. So that's an application, like an eligibility checklist. So on that date, we were supposed to identify whether it was in person or by phone. So we were cited on only having the date there and not identifying in person or via phone. All right, and number 7, for staff eligibility procedures, the Policy Council has to have written established policy and procedures, as Ms. Babin said, sounds like what we're used to. However, it's more like a faculty handbook in this case. But it has to spell out and define if something happens where a staff member would violate federal or program eligibility regulations. We have to define actions. As we operate a little differently as a school district, because we have job descriptions that ensure that, and policy and procedure for the school system. However, we do need to rectify that in our policy council procedures. Okay, I'll turn it over to Ms. Rodriguez for the corrective actions and next steps that are currently being planned.
So to start off with our corrective actions and next steps, our first one, we have to create an action plan for each one of these findings. So just a very detailed action plan that takes us through all those steps. And then also embedded in there, we go through a root cause analysis. So looking really at the why behind, any of the non-compliance areas. When we move on to the second one, to review and update, so revising our policy council policy and procedures and related documents, just as Ms. Mathern said. So we basically are going to make something very similar to a faculty handbook, but that really guides our policy council and then also our management team on some of the things that Head Start wants to see, very specifically looking at enrollment, eligibility, and things like that. Those things will be documented in there, some of those pieces of evidence. When we move to strength and monitoring, so defining responsibilities, documentation, and follow-up on our oral health compliance. So specifically the monitoring piece of that. Some of that monitoring now at our early learning centers lies with our nurses, as they are the health coordinators there. And then at our school sites now, we have family service workers through Head Start. And so those are those monitoring pieces at our school sites. As we know, our school nurses are very tasked on a daily basis. And so our family service workers are the ones who do that monitoring there now. For engaging governance, we're ensuring our policy council and governing board review, approve, and document our corrective actions. So one of those steps are here today when we are with you all, and then as we create our handbook, we will bring that for you all to review and approve, but then also bringing that to our policy council for them to approve as well. The next piece is training and implementation. And so communicating the changes and training our staff. Some of that training with our staff may be one-on-one, especially when we speak about things such as financial statements that we share with our policy council. So that's some one-on-one training with the bookkeeper and what that looks like. How we share those financial statements has to be very strategic, as it is comprised of parents, and we want to make sure that their perception of how we utilize our funds really aligns with our intent of how we use those funds. And then, but some of our training is school-wide, such as the toothbrushing. That was school-wide training that took place with our entire faculty at our monthly faculty meetings. Okay, if we move on to our next slide. So our monitor and course correct, one of the big things, I think both Ms. Babin and Ms. Mathern can speak to this too, Head Start really likes to see monitoring of the things that we put in place to make sure we have a checks and balances. So that is one of the things that we have to have monitoring as part of our corrective actions. Then moving on to document evidence, so maintaining clear documentation demonstrating implementation and effectiveness. So all of the documentation pieces for all of these action plans will be uploaded and sent to the Head Start Enterprise. So strengthen ERSI. ERSI is our ERSI coordinator. That's a specific role, and that stands for eligibility, recruitment, selection, enrollment, and attendance. And so specifically looking at the procedures that our ERSI coordinator goes through when she's determining if students are eligible to fill those Head Start spots. For the interview checklist that Ms. Mathern shared, we are going to add to it a location for us to select whether it was an in-person or phone interview to satisfy that area of non-compliance. And also just to kind of clarify some of our language there. And then engaging our management team. So making sure that our management staff is a part of our corrective action process. Okay.
So before we switch into the next topic, are there any questions regarding the areas that were identified as non-compliance or the actions that were taken to rectify those?
Any questions?
Thanks for dealing with it.
Other non-compliance items. Lots.
Yes, sir.
I've never seen that many before in my 20 years.
I agree with you. Some of it does seem, petty in some ways of the majority point, like that was one that we talked about. So we've got some procedures in place as far as if the majority, usually we have great representation from our management side of having the administrators and having our family service workers. But if we're going to outnumber the parents at a particular meeting, we're going to make sure that we adjust and that we're complying, so we don't get slapped with a non-compliance piece, and make sure that our parent numbers are higher than the participant, which seems counterintuitive in some ways when you want to make sure that you've got all parties of our management team present, but we also don't want it to be counterproductive that we're sitting at this table talking about something that seems rather small. But there are some things that we can make sure that we can do quick fixes to put in place on those things to make sure, just like you, Mr. Ellis, we don't want to have those numbers. This is not anything that we want to ever bring to the table again, that we want to make sure that we are in compliance on those pieces. So we take pride in that too.
I do feel that some of these corrective actions are documentation, paperwork. It's not like when you walk around and truly see what's happening, and when, 'cause I was interviewed, and I think Ms. Boudreau was too, that when they're interviewing you, you're really not quite sure what they're asking you and how much you know, because, look, I know a lot about Head Start. And I think a lot of this is just paperwork, that maybe over the last few years that we wasn't clear on it, because we do a good job in our parish to make sure. I feel like, too, at least the corrective actions were not in the area of child care, child teaching. What are we doing? Making sure kids are being registered, safety guidelines. So I am pleased that these are the corrective actions. I'll take these any day than those other actions that we could have had. So I'm going to say kudos. We can definitely get this in place very quickly. And I agree with the parents on the council. You can't drag parents to come there. I mean, you're going to invite them, incentivize them as much as you can to get there. Sometimes you do have more people, so maybe you might need to say, hey, Becky, you go home. Ms. Boudreau, you go home, because we can't have more community members than parents if that's what they're looking for.
We'll adjust our school
Yeah,
staff
so I mean,
representation.
I'm okay with this. I really am, because I feel like this is just, like I said, paperwork.
I'll just add to, Ms. Ellis, I'd be concerned about non-compliance, but I'm really not concerned about this. To Ms. Becky's point is, I mean, this is administrative thing. These are administrative things, but to what they just mentioned a moment ago, number one, you're 50-50, but 50.01, you're okay. I mean, are we going to send somebody home and look, we're in compliance. We're expecting. The only way we're in compliance is if a parent shows up. I mean, that's hard. Like, I don't know. I found that one difficult. But I mean, other stuff. Look, whatever.
We can fix it.
Whether you had a phone interview or not. Look, they're rules. We got to follow them. I get it.
Yep, and we're prepared to adjust.
I'm just not that concerned. I don't think it's like a major. But
Mr. Gregson, if we're not in compliance, we'll lose this program. They'll take that away from us.
I understand that. I'm just saying that.
And we've had Head Start here since in the 60s.
But I guess my point is, this part right here is not about kids.
What?
These corrective actions are not about kids. It's not about education or kids. It's a red tape. It's a way of saying it's justified my job.
All of this stuff is about the welfare of those little tiny kids.
Okay.
Who can't fend for themselves.
So we certainly recognize where we need to grow, and we will embrace the opportunity to grow and correct those citations. So you want to move to the next part?
I will move into our next one. So when we look at our next slide, this is COLA, which is the cost of living adjustment. These were some recent allocations that were provided to us. And so just want to bring this. This is one of those things that we do feel like is elevated to making sure that we bring to the board. So you will see that the funds would increase the Head Start supported position, and this particular position is the center director salary reducing that board contribution. So when we come to you all in February for approval of the supplemental amount, this is one of those positions we would actually be able to then reduce the district's contribution because of the cost of living adjustment that we're getting. It's not an increase in the salary, it's just shifting the dollars now that we've got some COLA funds that we can apply in that way. So just wanted to make you all aware that this was the amount in $13,091 that will now reduce district contributions to that position. Okay.
So the exciting part of this, just looking at the numbers, specifically first, we will take a look at pre-K 3 expansion, and then we will go to universal pre-K 4. I just wanted to bring back up that our 249 Head Start spots have been filled. It normally takes us until about October, November that we are within that range. If we dip below a certain amount, we then have to go into a special support program with Head Start, but we have already reached that number, and we have several of other students who could technically fill those spots and now are on wait list. So just very exciting, and we're excited about those. The positive growth. So looking at our pre-K 3 expansion specifically, so we tracked our data from May 31st until August 25th was the last update that we got from our ERC coordinator. I will meet with her tomorrow to start to approve some more students in spots. But we have seen, we were at 95 total between our two early learning centers at the end of May, and we are now at 114 students. We also are seeing growth in the amount of students with disabilities that we are having. Specifically at our two sites, we currently have 17 total. Within the next 2 weeks, we will hold 6 more IEP meetings. And we have more IEPs that have disseminated, and we are just waiting to schedule those meetings. So we are seeing great growth there as well. And so we are very excited to give that opportunity to our pre-K 3 students with disabilities to be with their non-disabled peers.
How's that number compare to the previous year?
So in
17?
previous years at the early learning centers, our pre-K 3 students, if they did qualify for IEP services, they then had to be moved to a school site. Gotcha. And so we didn't get to track those numbers as closely, or they went directly to the school site. And so this is really the first year, and our staff has really embraced that change.
Now, Ms. Rodriguez, are we seeing like significant disabilities, like, for example, feeding tubes, children of that nature? Are we seeing more of kids that have not been able to be identified just yet, the DD? So are we seeing more of the significant disabilities, or not as much that, but more of the other DDs?
So right now, if we're looking at the students that we have, we do have one IEP coming up where one of the students does have a G-tube for feeding. Okay. Outside of that, all of these students fall in that developmental delay category. Okay. And so between exposure and that support from all of our service providers, which we're very fortunate that they're able to push into the classrooms a lot. And so we have our speech therapists right along with our special education teacher and para. And so with that, we are hoping to see great growth with those students.
And I'm glad, because I truly believe in early intervention. Mm-hmm. And I've seen that myself as an administrator in the past, that kids that came to us early on, by the time they got the 3rd, 4th grade, some of them were able to be mainstream out of that identification and go into the regular. So I'm hoping with all that we know now, and that we really can, with these early interventions, identifying these kids, that we can give them the support that they need, that when they go into our schools, that hopefully later on, they'll be able to make that transition into the classroom without an IEP.
Yes, ma'am.
That is my hope.
Absolutely.
I think it's also a testament to the vision that you all had as a board, because being able to have them with their age-appropriate peers is so important. Mm-hmm. So where students previously, as Ms. Rodriguez expressed, if they had an IEP need, now they were transferred to a school site for those supports, but then they lost the opportunity to be with other 3-year-olds. So now we're able to have them with age-appropriate peers, and that's going to mean a world of difference. Just this week, I had a conversation with a grandparent whose child is at one of our centers. And she said before, very limited, hardly speaks. But after 3 days, just this weekend, that he was singing in the back of the car and bopping along. It was 2 different songs that she knew was part of the instruction. So just, she said the amount of impact in 3 days. So she's like, I'm so excited to see the growth that he's going to have by participating in our programs.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, and then we will go to universal pre-K4 enrollment. So I wanted to draw our attention to the end of the 25-26 school year. We had 195 students in pre-K. Now that we are at universal pre-K4 and we are only at August, we have 427 students. So a 232 student growth, just very powerful. And 152 of those students are Head Start qualified, and so that is their funding source that they have there. Anything else that you all want to add?
Just to add a little context, because I know these numbers, as the former principal at New Sarpy, I know our average kindergarten class, like grade level, was about 110 kids. So when you look, New Sarpy right now is at 98 students. So we've almost captured the entire kindergarten class of 27, 28 and have them in pre-K. That's very exciting. Yeah.
And, I can't emphasize how significant this is, especially for a system that has seen a decline in student population for the last 4 years. This supplements the potential loss of this year, right? If we're steadily about a 3% decline, so this year we're actually looking at hopefully either even and or higher enrollment than we had last year. So it is positive, but probably most importantly, I know you mentioned it with the 3-year-olds, but think about a 3-year-old. Families with students with potential disabilities could not put their child in daycare, right? Because they were developmentally delayed. A lot of times I heard from parents that would say, well, my child can't because they won't allow them to be educated, right? Or to be able to attend daycare. So the fact that we're opening up these opportunities for 3-year-olds, which we've expanded, and now 4-year-olds, and you see the growth by having the neighborhood schools, it's going to continue, I think, to spread across our community that we provide the highest quality education possible for 3 on up. So very, very exciting. I will say this, though. These ladies here deserve a lot of credit because when you look, there really should be a 4th person, which we decided not to hire for purposes of fiscal responsibility, but they have taken on a lot of additional responsibilities, tracking to manage the Head Start students at the school sites, in addition to the number of expanded 3-year-old. I know I very much appreciate their commitment to this. It's a lot of extra work, a lot of new learning, but I really want to commend these 3 for working together and working with our school principals, because our principals, this is pretty challenging for them as well. Is a Head Start kid, is it not? Do you give them Cheetos? Do you give them not Cheetos? Whatever not Cheetos. Goldfish, right? Because if they're Head Start students and they get a snack, by regulations, if they're not, then they don't. So all of these things I'm learning, I did not know about, so I can only imagine the pressure it's put on them, and you're held accountable to it. Like, there is no standard, right? So the person that was supposed to be supporting this is no longer with us, so they've really picked up a lot of weight. So I do want to thank them on behalf of the system.
Yeah, and special thanks to Ms. Rodriguez, who fields most of the questions from the principals, because she is living this every day and can answer many of their Head Start questions. Just another point on this slide, if you'll notice, Mimosa, St. Rose, and New Sarpy are all very close to having another class added. So the Head Start guidelines are 1 teacher to 20 students. So once the class gets to 20, we have to open up another class. So you'll see New Sarpy's 2 away from adding another class. Going up, St. Rose is 7 students away from another class, and Mimosa is 7 students away from another class. So Ms. Bavin's already preparing and ordering materials as needed, and HR, Human Resources, is already on board with looking at potential candidates if we need to get there.
Good problem to have.
It is a good problem. And if you just look at the jump in numbers from like the July 31st column to the August 25th, the news is out there, the positive news to our families, like this is a pretty good program. Get your kids in this program. This is a great thing. So again, great problem to have, and we're very excited to point out those exciting points.
I don't want to, well, I'm gonna. Bring it back to what we talked about earlier and the Dibbles data. I remember having a conversation once about there was no way to do a Dibbles tracker to find out kids that were in our pre-K school system or they were coming from like a daycare or whatever, that was very hard to actually gather that information. Can we track now this data, now that they're in the schools, now that we have, I guess, access to, can we say this is the Dibbles for the ones who went to our pre-K, these are the Dibbles scores for the ones who did not go to pre-K?
Absolutely.
I would just be very interested to know that number.
We will, and that's something that they're tasked with doing. But I do know that we were able to do some comparisons relative to the Pele data
Yes,
from our
some,
daycares too,
yes.
correct, where you did see a pretty significant
Yeah,
difference
that's why I
in
wanna
the
see
trajectory
this.
of those kids, so we will.
Yeah.
Note of that as we're getting, we're wrapping up with our Dibbles beginning of the year, so we will be able to even see our students from last year, but now we've even got 232 additional students this year.
Important when we think about the value of what it does for the child, because a lot of people, oh, you're starting school too early for them. Kids from the time they can talk want to learn. They want to. They want to learn their letters. They want to learn colors. They want to play, but that's what I love about what they're doing in Head Start. It is play-based learning. And when they're, hungry and craving this knowledge and this education, I think it just prepares them better for kindergarten, for first grade. This is not the first day that they're looking at this stuff. And it's incredible, and I advocate and fight for it. The perspective, the perception, all of it. I will have this conversation all day about the value of what I even saw in the difference in my own two children. So I just, again, thank you.
Visiting the early childhood programs that we support through Dr. Odinga, their programs are structured just like a school day.
Yes, the same.
Starting from the youngest, that 1-year-old on up. So I don't think, like, in support of what Ms. Boudreau saying, they just want to learn and be with their friends, and they just want to play. And I truly believe that the more structure you have for children to know, I'm going to school, I'm going to brush my teeth, I'm going to read a book, I'm going to do. We know how successful children are with that exposure. And so, I saw it with the early childhood programs that, we're involved with. I've seen it in our programs, so I do feel like Ms. Boudreau was saying, there's nothing like learning, and they do. They want to learn, so I think this is tremendous. I really do. I'm so excited because this is the biggest positive thing that I've heard throughout is the universal pre-K.
For so long, educational systems have been built on remediation and retention and thinking about the upper grades and trying to do that. We are now catching it on the front end and being able to provide access and opportunity for our students. When we think about being members of our network, as Ms. Weber is referencing, when we think about the child care centers that are in our network, and we have 7 of them, we're about to have an 8th one, but we do provide supports to them, and they're using the same curriculum. We're using Frog Street curriculum from early on. They are participating in professional development alongside our pre-K3 and pre-K4 teachers. So our network centers are getting that same level of support as well. Our coaches go out to them. Obviously our priority is more of our 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds in the school system, but we do want to also continue to provide that support with our coaches, and then having our director of the lead agency network. She's obviously at those centers even more so than the coaches, but providing that coherence in our system is definitely helping to make sure that our students enter kindergarten ready. So I agree.
You brought us back to Dibbles and a connection here. I remembered when our district was honored at the State Department recently for our literacy achievement and ranking 4th in the state. And Dr. Brumley, the state superintendent, mentioned he showed statewide Dibbles scores from BOI to EOI. And he said, we've got to do something about those BOI kindergarten scores. And we all looked at each other and said, we got you. Because St. Charles is going to bump that up because we are getting all of these kids kindergarten ready. So we know we're going to be a big part of that BOI kindergarten score for next year. So more to come. We'll be looking to celebrate that.
I was going to say, to Ms. Babin's point, proactive instead of reactive is the approach we're taking. But the other part is the growth from Luling, from 21 to 70. Kudos.
Opportunity.
That's unbelievable.
Yes. And I think it's going to continue to grow across the district. The more people hear about this, they're just creeping up to the numbers that equal our kindergarten class, and that's a great thing. And we're ready for it. Okay, our next slide, I have 2 slides just to show you a little connection of how Head Start trickles into the school sites right now. Head Start standards, this is a book of all the Head Start standards, 130 pages of them, but I'm going to touch on 2 today.
reading
The
pleasure.
child nutrition standard, one way we're bringing it to the school sites is we're required to document in our policy and procedure for our policy council that we have shared healthy and nutrition information to all pre-K-4 families. So we'll be sending that out through school status, through school newsletters, and with each 4-year-old family. I've been working with our child nutrition department to come up with flyers that really promote that program. We want them all to eat at school because all Head Start students do receive a free meal. So we're going to promote our lunch program as the primary source of nutritious meals for these students, for all students, but for Head Start students as well. And then we're going to encourage our families and teach our families about healthy eating habits, both at home and at school. And then another area is in human resources and student health services, and I have to thank both of these departments, our nurses and our human resource department, because they have both had to expand because this comes with more adults interacting with 4-year-olds on our school campuses, so we had to increase the number of criminal background checks and the CPR certification. Both of those numbers expanded greatly as we have more children, and we expanded to 8 sites. So just wanted to touch on and thank those departments for their support there.
I just want to thank you all as the board for your support of our early learners. We know this work couldn't be done without you all, so thank you.
Thank you so much.
If you didn't grow it, the numbers, and fill it, we couldn't justify or validate us, say, the investment. And when y'all filled it, I think it was a no-brainer for all of us.
It's exciting. We
Thank you.
certainly appreciate y'all and your team. So I know it's.
For the support to make this happen.
Thank y'all for coming in.
Any questions or comments before we adjourn?
I'm not on the committee.
You can say it.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. If there's no objection, we stand adjourned. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.
What a great meeting.
This was a great meeting. I have to run. I think Ms. Mathern has to run too, but thank y'all, board, for this. I know this was different, but Ms. Al, thank you for facilitating this. I have some follow-up for you. Yeah, you and me. Okay.
I know you did. We'll compare.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you.